Most writers don't realize the mistakes they're making. They think, the more I write, the better I'll become. Or it's all about luck. It's all about being in the right place at the right time. So if I just keep writing scripts, it gives me more chances.
If I understand you correctly, Corey, it sounds like that things are picking up for writers and that studios and streamers, they're looking for new content. And so now is a great time. Is it an easy time?
No. Great question, though. It's never easy. And the challenge is and this was true for me when I was starting out, is, someone could be the best writer of their friends or their writer group or in their class, but you're competing against the best of the best. It's one thing to be a great high school athlete. It's a lot harder to be a professional athlete. So the bar is really high and there's a lot of competition. And different people are going to take this differently. And I'm sure some people are going to have a lot to say and they're not going to be happy about this. But I think for certain people, this is actually really good news. And for whatever it's worth, I'm going to say I'm just the messenger here. But when I talk to agents and managers and producers and executives, they're worried. They're worried about this sort of new crop of emerging writers who want to be professional writers. And they're saying this is the weakest kind of generation of people trying to become professional writers than we've seen. And we're concerned that as we need more and more product, there's going to be fewer new writers who can deliver at the level we need to. So that's good news in so much as if a writer is willing to put their head down and do the right work and really develop themselves, and not, come into this thinking, I know everything and I know how to write and my writing's great and anyone who disagrees is an idiot. Anyone who's really willing to put the work in, but put the right kind of work in, it's actually really good news because they're going to have less competition than, maybe I had when I was breaking in. But I want to be really clear that it's never easy. And it's always a high benchmark that you need to hit. But the good news is for the writers who are willing to invest in themselves and put their head down and do the right things and really develop their abilities, there's an industry that's going to be waiting for them, that's looking for them. Again, I get calls all the time looking for these writers. They're not looking for, hey, any writers who have some talent and want to be TV writers and movie writers? They're not asking that. They're saying, do you know anyone who's writing at an incredibly high level that nobody knows about and has really a powerful, unique way of telling stories? Do you know any of those people? Because we are desperate to find more and more of those people. And it's not easy. No one's born that. The truth is, and I know a lot of Academy Award-winning writers. I've trained some writers who won the Academy Award. I've trained writers who've won Emmys. No one's born an exceptional writer. Everyone starts off with certain inherent strengths, weaknesses, and blind spots, and it's learning what you need to do to become an exceptional writer.
Do you think that people can try too hard? We always hear, well, you don't work hard enough, or maybe they didn't put enough hours in. Do you think there are things that writers can do that push people away by trying too hard?
Well, anything's possible. I've never seen a writer fail because they put too much time in. But what I see all the time is most writers fail because they put the time in doing the wrong things and they don't put the time in doing the right things. So I've seen writers fail because they don't have a strong enough work ethic and they're not willing to put the effort in. And I see a lot of writers fail, and I think this is tragic, is they have the work ethic and they sacrifice and they put the time in, but they don't do the right things. They do a lot of the wrong things.
Like?
Let me answer it this way. When I was starting out, and I had this dream to be a screenwriter, and I somehow got into film school at UCLA and I came down here. On some levels, I was really insecure, but on other levels, I had a lot of confidence. I'm like, well, I'm a smart guy. People like my jokes. I was doing stand-up and I was getting booked in some of the big venues in LA. And you know, I can succeed as a writer. And I had this confidence and this bravado. And I wrote some scripts and I got feedback. And I remember the first time I got a producer, it was an Academy Award-winning producer, read my script. And he brought me in. And in a fairly nice way, he let me know, like, you have some potential, you have some raw talent, but like this script's not even close to what it needs to be. And that was really hard to hear. It wasn't what my expectations were. And I've learned over time as I've worked with writers, I think a lot of writers start out with this sort of confidence and bravado. And I think that's great. I think it's necessary. I see a lot of writers who don't have that initial confidence and bravado. And they talk a lot about writing and they want to write, but they don't write. Or they keep writing scripts and they don't finish them because that's not good enough. Or they're working on the same script for 5 years trying to get it good enough. I actually think it's really helpful for most people to start out saying, I could do this. I've seen a lot of movies. I've seen a lot of TV shows. I know what a good story is. People think I'm relatively smart. I can do this. I think it's really great to start that way because that gets you writing scripts and finishing them and rewriting them and showing them to people. But, and I talk to so many successful writers and they have the same story. At some point, you're gonna show it to someone and you're gonna realize that it's harder than you think it is. And yeah, you're smart and you have some talent, but there's a lot more than that that's required. And you made a lot of mistakes. Most writers, now goes to your question, most writers don't realize the mistakes they're making. They think, the more I write, the better I'll become. Or it's all about luck. It's all about being in the right place at the right time. So if I just keep writing scripts, it gives me more chances. For most writers, and this is agents and managers saying this, the more you write, the taller the pile of similarly flawed scripts because there's certain mistakes that writers make and they don't know they're making them. And the only way to know you're making them is to write a bunch of scripts, think they're really good, show them to people who know what they're talking about and realize, oh, I'm making these mistakes. And I see this all the time because that's something I do with writers regularly. My one-on-one clients or people in my workshops is helping them see what they're doing right and the mistakes they're making. And I can tell at that moment, like, who has a better chance of success or not, because some people, when you point out the mistakes, they're argumentative, they're defensive, they don't want to agree with you. It's really important for them to keep their confidence and bravado. I was pretty devastated when I got that feedback from that producer, but I was so lucky because what that producer explained to me is, and he gave an example of a writer, I'm not going to give her name, but she'd won the Academy Award, she was huge. And he goes, I remember 7 years ago reading one of her first scripts saying the same thing. And then he gave other examples. And he said, this is really a good thing if you think about it, because you have weaknesses in your writing that you don't know about, and there's mistakes you're making, you don't know about it. And the only way to know about it is to write and have someone point it out to you. Now you have an opportunity to figure out how to correct those mistakes, how to turn that weakness into a strength. And when you do that, your writing is going to improve and you're going to make new mistakes. And so there's a certain way I came to think of it is there's a certain number of mistakes you have to make. So let's get it over with as fast as possible. Like if there's a certain number of mistakes that I have to make and learn from, I'd much rather go through that process in a year than 15 years because I'm defensive and I'm fighting it. That is the mindset. And that is what a lot of people in the industry are saying they're not seeing so much in younger writers now. And everyone has their theories why, and I'm not going to go into that. It's a mindset of, they're seeing more of a mindset of I've seen all these TV shows and movies. I'm very knowledgeable and film and TV literate as they are. I mean, I see it in my newer writers. They are like experts on film and TV in a way that I certainly wasn't at their age. Absolutely. But, you know, I could go and watch a lot of ballet and get really knowledgeable. It doesn't mean I can do ballet. You know, if I tried to do ballet, I'm going to the hospital if I'm lucky. So just because you watch a lot of TV shows and movies and you have a sense of what makes for a good story or not a good story, that's helpful. But it doesn't mean yet that you can write great characters and dialogue and pacing and escalation. So I think one of the things that's really important for writers, if they're really serious about their writing, is just adjust your expectations and say, everyone is born or not born, everyone comes to writing with some weaknesses. They're making mistakes. Everyone, the greatest writers in the world. What matters is, instead of hiding from them, aggressively trying to find people you respect who know what they're talking about to point it out to you. And then, if you're smart, try to figure out or have them help you figure out, what can I do to turn that weakness into a strength so I don't keep making that mistake? So that is, you know, I've been fortunate enough to train a lot of writers who now have careers. And this is one of the things that is so important, is that it's their mindset. And part of what goes into that also is resilience. And that's a big topic for me because that was my weakness as a writer, and I never overcame it. And it really limited my career. And the way I define resilience is every day when you sit down to write, you bring your A game and you write to the best of your ability. What I see in other writers, and it was true for me, is that when things were going my way, the writing was pouring. I was hitting that keyboard and I was writing and it was flowing. When things weren't going my way, if I got my agent called and I got some bad news on a project, or something happened in my personal life that threw me off balance, I wouldn't write, or if I did write, I would write kind of tentatively, kind of fearful and scared. I wasn't writing to the best of my ability. So my writing was informed by what was going on in my life, where the most successful writers that I know, they're resilient. And when they sit down to write, they write to the best of their ability, no matter what's going on. And if they just won the Academy Award, or, you know, if they just got tragic news in their life, their writing doesn't change. Their writing is their writing. That is really important. I think that ties into mindset. And another thing that I think is really important, again, looking over now 15 years of working with so many writers and seeing who's gone on to success and who hasn't, courage, and I want to define courage in a certain way. Something I see in writers, and I can relate to this, is a lot of writers are trying to write something they can sell. So they're trying to write to the marketplace. You know, what does the marketplace want right now? Oh, I'm going to write this kind or this genre or this. The writers that I see who go on to success, they don't do that. They're not trying to write something to sell. What they're doing is they're writing something that they have to write. It's coming from a real personal, passionate place. And I hear this from agents all the time, is that we're looking for a writer who can write a script that nobody else could have written. And I'll illustrate this with a true story. I was really fortunate to get an agent early on, and I was in film school, and I got a major agent. I sold a project to Ridley Scott, and I was a studio writer, and I was doing these projects. I was making a lot of money. My agent, Diane Cairns, left to go run Universal. So I stayed at my agency and I had a new agent, Jeff Robinoff, then he left to go run Warner Brothers, and then I had another agent and they left to run. So it was basically all my agents were leaving to run studios. And there was this, a younger agent, up and rising agent who left that agency and they went to Endeavor. And he's like, just come over with me to Endeavor because your agents keep leaving you. I'm not gonna leave you. I'm not gonna run a studio anytime soon. Come over here to me, come work with me at Endeavor. And I thought about it, and there was this senior agent at Endeavor who I wanted to be my agent because I had some friends that he represented. And he's amazing. He wasn't just selling scripts, he was creating these amazing careers. I really wanted this agent to represent me. So I told this up and coming agent, I'll come over if it's you and this person. And the up and coming agent's like, we don't need him and here's why. But we went around and finally he said, okay, you would be more comfortable if this big senior agent was, on your team. I'll make that happen. So I said, great. And then I get a call a few weeks later. He goes, I don't have good news. He goes, that agent has read your stuff. He was generally impressed. He could see why you're working. He thinks you're going to continue to work, make a lot of money, but he's not interested in representing you. Why? And I'll never forget what he said. He said, because when he read your work, he said, it's really smart, it's really well written, but any writer could have written it that way. It was like you're a smart utilitarian writer. And he only wants to represent writers who, when they write something, only they could have written it. So it's something when you read it, you're like, I've never seen a voice or a story or characters like this. It's wholly unique, and only this writer could have written it. Those are the writers that have the best careers. And the challenge is, if you're not writing that way and you're trying to sell something, so you're writing, a horror script or this kind of a comedy, the thing is everyone's writing those scripts. It doesn't stand out. And if you think about it from an agent or manager's point of view, they've got people that can write those scripts who have credits. So when there's a job opening, they're gonna get those writers the job. And you, the newer writer who's writing those scripts, you're gonna be left out. What they want is a writer who can write something that none of their clients can write. A wholly unique writer with a unique voice. And that can take courage because for me, when I look back at it, I refuse to do that. And the reason I refuse to do it is I was always so afraid of rejection. I was always so afraid that people would read my stuff and say, oh, it's not very good. I didn't realize it at the time, but I didn't want to put myself, my authentic self, into the scripts because then it would feel like they weren't just rejecting the scripts, but they were rejecting me. So I was never put my soul into the scripts. And so that's why my scripts, maybe people were impressed with the structure and the characters and the story, but it felt like a kind of script that a lot of writers could have written. There wasn't anything just like wholly unique about it. And I'm always blown away when I get writers that come to work with me and they're just so fiercely authentic in their writing. And they're always, as agents will say, like, I'm looking to read a script where I feel like that writer had to tell that story, not because they were trying to sell it. And the thing that a lot of writers don't realize is if you want a career, the way to get a career is to get a lot of people in the industry wanting to work with you. And so when I teach at UCLA, I'll get an agent and bring in the scripts that they sign new writers off of, and have people read those scripts. And they're all really unique and original. And a lot of these scripts, you're like, I don't think you could sell this script. And the agent's like, oh, I know I couldn't sell the script. But it was a head-turning script. When I gave it to people to read and they read it, they're like, oh my God, I've never read a script like this. This is amazing. I want to meet this writer. I want to be in business with this writer. And you get enough people doing that, That's how you get a career. I didn't get a career by writing a script and selling it. I wrote a script, I got an agent, that got me meetings, and I sold the pitch to Ridley Scott. So the ability to write something that is wholly original, that you can put yourself into it, takes courage. Another thing that, again, having worked with so many writers and seeing how they ended up, I think that, and this goes back to, no matter how inherently talented and hardworking, that it's about putting the time in, but what you do at that time. And so a lot of writers, unfortunately, are taught rules. A lot of the books and classes are rules in terms of like, what has to happen on this page, what has to happen at the act break, what happens in the middle. And if you understand how the industry operates, agents and managers are looking for unique stories and writers that can write stuff that we haven't seen before and isn't predictable and doesn't feel generic. And so in the class that I just finished teaching, there were two students who are script readers, one for Apple TV and one for Paramount. And they say something that all script readers always say when they come to my classes is they're told right away that if there's something that's formulaic or rule-based, put it in the trash. We're not going to look at it. And so what's really important is to understand the difference between tools and rules. And I know a lot of people say that, but it's really important to understand that there are certain tools that you use to create compelling original stories. And I've talked about those tools in previous Film Courage videos, so I don't need to do that. You could just go back and watch those videos, or you could go to my website, corymandell.net, and there's some information behind paywalls, and then there's free information. But it's really important to, when you're thinking about writing and you're writing, like anytime the word should comes into your head, you're in trouble. Like I should do this or I should do that. No. It's not about should. It's about what is it that you're trying to say? What is really unique about it? And then what are the tools, the narrative tools like conflict or story engines or Heart of Darkness? What are the tools that you need to bring this to life? And it's about practicing the tools and then using those tools to create something wholly unique that only you could have written. A lot of writers won't do that, but the writers that do, that's how you become that needle in the haystack that everyone's looking for.
And would you say part of that is because they haven't lived anything that unique? Or no, everybody's lived something unique that's sort of elitist to say you haven't experienced enough trauma or interesting sort of things in your life?
I've seen, what's my youngest student? I've had like 16 and 17-year-olds with parental permission take my workshops. And some of them have written amazing scripts. I think all you need is to have experienced love and experienced loss, and at least one time in your life been deeply ashamed of something that you did or didn't do. You have dreams, you have fantasies, you have fears and nightmares. You crave community, you crave meaning, you're confused, you're trying to figure it all out. As long as you got that, you have what you need to be a writer. The rest you can get with research. I mean, I recently worked with some writers that sold a script, and it's an amazing police procedural that takes place in Paris. It has to take place in Paris. And it's, when people read it, they're like, oh my God, these people had to have been Parisian detectives. They were not detectives. They never lived in Paris. They were not police. But they researched it to the point that they could inhabit that world and those characters and write it that way. So I believe in you write what you know in terms of just your emotions and your take on things, your unique way of looking. Everyone looks at the world differently. And the rest you get from research if you need.
Corey, the first script that you wrote that got attention,
Yeah.
what was that? Was that from some kind of painful experience? How did you kind of let yourself go in order to get some type of meeting or?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a funny answer, I guess, which is I did what I tell people not to do. I did what agents and managers and producers tell people not to do. I was at film school. I was, I don't come from money. I didn't have a safety net. And I'm like, I'm going to give myself 2 years. And if I don't sell something, I'm going to law school or business school. That's a terrible way to go about it, but that's how I was going about it. And after writing some scripts and being taught these tools and finally, like in a place where I wasn't making these mistakes, I'm like, okay, I now feel like I'm ready to try to write something. What did I do? I talked to people, I researched what's selling right now, and I'm gonna write something that's gonna sell. I didn't ask myself like, what do I wanna be writing? Or, like coming from a personal place. No, I just was like, what is selling right now? And it was very specific at that time. It was thrillers with female protagonists. So I'm gonna come up with a high concept thriller with a female protagonist. And when I'm writing it, I'm just gonna navigate toward what I think is commercial and exciting to a reader. And it's got nothing to do with me. The main character was a female psychologist. Well, I'm not female, I'm not a psychologist, and there's a whole thriller aspect with her husband. I don't have a husband, I'm not married, so, boom, and I wrote it. And then that was the script that got me this agent, major agent. It was crazy. I mean, I'm in film school and I get signed by Diane Cairns, who represents Callie Corey, who just won the Academy Award for Thelma and Louise, Milos Forman, and me. They were up here, I'm sure, and I was down here on her roster, but still. Well, the funny thing is, years later, as I came to, get to know a lot of successful writers, agents, and managers, and realize, wow, I did it very differently than the way everyone says you should do it. But looking back at it, what I realized is I did absolutely write it from a very personal place. I was actually describing and writing from like one of my greatest nightmares. I just didn't know it. It was completely unconscious. I'm just thinking how much I want to say. I'll just say this, that the main character had some very profound fears about herself in relationship to her mother. And these were the exact fears that I had that were so traumatic for me. I didn't know I had those fears. It was like not something I was consciously aware of. So unconsciously, subconsciously, I did it the way you're supposed to do it, but not deliberately and not with purpose. So perhaps I was just really lucky. I don't think luck's a great strategy for success. So that's why, in my workshops, I'm teaching people a process for starting with something that's really important to them and then learning how to translate that into high concept commercial property. So basically, I'm reverse engineering what I did and helping people do that deliberately. So I did do it that way, but without knowing or trying to do it that way.
At what point did you realize that?
Gosh, probably like 7. So I was really young when I started my writing career. I was like 23 when I sold the project to Ridley Scott and got on the front page of Variety. UCLA asked me if I'd come teach the next year. So I'm 24 and I'm teaching like once a year. And then as I'm teaching more and more, and I don't know, probably I was like maybe 30, so maybe it was like 7 years. I really fell in love with teaching, and I was teaching more and more. And I was spending time and energy really trying to figure out, all these students were coming to me and they were so smart and they knew all the books and all the paradigms and they weren't getting where they wanted to get to. And I was really trying to figure out, what's the truth of the industry? What do you need to do? And how do you train people to do that? So I really started thinking deeply about it. And I think it was at that point when I was like, oh, wow, I didn't try to do it the right way. I just sort of luckily did it. And my wife, who's way smarter than me, said, I think you did it that way, you just didn't know it. And I'm like, no. And then a week later, I'm like, I think I did it without, and I went back and looked at it and she was right. And so it was only after I really started focusing on helping other writers train themselves in the right way that I went back and realized it. In my case, I think it's probably a good thing I didn't know it, because I don't know, it was a lot of heavy stuff I was actually writing about without knowing it. And I think at that point in my life, I was like, 22 when I wrote that? I don't think I was ready to really confront that head on.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.